Hola a todos. Hello everybody, I'm Matt and welcome to the first video in this new Spanish course. So this course is Spanish grammar for English speakers. So not only does it give you a base in Spanish grammar, looking at things like nouns, verbs, conjugations, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, things you mightn't have heard since school or things you mightn't ever have heard of. But it also gives you it through the eyes of an English speaker, so we can look at some comparisons in English and see how it squares up, and also look at some differences. I think this is the best way to sort of make it manageable and understanding, because a lot of the times grammar can seem very daunting because we haven't done it for so long. So the first section we're going to do is nouns. Now, if you're like me, before I started teaching languages, if somebody asked me what a noun was, I had the standard response: it's a naming word. You know, a noun is a naming word, a verb is a doing word. But I didn't actually know what that meant, because, like, what does it name? It's okay for things like, okay, a tree is a naming word. Um, a mobile phone is a naming word, so it's a noun. But then when you get into more abstract things, you start going, well, geez, is sacrifice, is that a verb? Is that a noun? What about happiness? Because that's not a thing, is it? Is it like, it's not tactile? It's not tangible. And then the same things with things like sleep or liberty. So what I always like to think of, it's anything that you can put the, a, or an in front of. So for example, we could have an idea, we could have a sacrifice, the liberty, the sleep, and therefore we know it's a noun. Now in Spanish, although they have nouns, it's a bit different because they introduce gender into the mix. So yes, so Spanish nouns have gender, masculine and feminine. You've probably heard of this. If not, we're going to talk about it a lot in this video. The other thing is that the, and an have various forms. Really, in Spanish, you don't have an. That's an English thing, for the pronunciation. But you do have, like, for example, the word the has a singular, it has a plural, it has a masculine, it has a feminine, and we're going to look at all that good stuff. And finally, we're going to have a look at how gender affects the rest of the sentences for things like adjectives. So let's look at gender in English for a second, because we do have it. You could have a male actor or a female actress, a male prince or a female princess. These words don't change that much, you know, we just add a little tail on at the end. But then we'll have some words that radically change, like uncle and aunt aren't anything like each other. We'll have rooster and hen. And then even we'll have words that even as native speakers sometimes we can't remember, like, oh, what's a female horse called? Because we have things like stallions and mares, you know? So they're so different that we actually can't even remember them sometimes. Well, Spanish is the same. So for words like, for example, boy or girl, they have chico, chica. So boy is chico, girl is chica. Or for example, brother, sister, brother is hermano, and sister is hermana. Okay, so as you can see, here does the O goes to an A. It's a small change, and it's actually closer to some of the changes that you have in English. However, also like English, sometimes they radically change. So for example, if you have like man and woman, man would be hombre, and woman would be mujer. So they're nothing like each other, and that is quite a big change. Now, so far so good. I think this part's easy enough to swallow for us because it's quite similar to English. You know, like, yeah, we have this concept in English that there's a male and female version of things. But I think this part's quite straightforward because with these words, there's like a biological basis for it. You know, they're biologically male or biologically female. But Spanish goes one step further, and it actually puts gender on everything. So things that you might have felt were neutral or don't have a gender, in Spanish they do. So let's look at an example. For example, in Spanish, car is coche, and it's always masculine, whereas house is casa, and it's always feminine. Okay, so don't overthink this. Like they don't take on like masculine or feminine properties. It's just two categories. You know, it could be masculine, feminine. It could be red and pink. It could be apples and pears. You know, it just happens to be like that. It's just the names they have, and it affects other words. You know, so you can call them whatever two categories, but they don't take on any actual masculine or feminine properties. Just to show you, for example, in Spanish, a beard is feminine, an Adam's apple is feminine, but a dress is masculine. So it doesn't really have any basis in that. A lot of the times, the gender assigned is just to do with how it's spelt, or sometimes they just keep the same gender that the word had from Greek or Latin, before it came into the Spanish language. So your first job is to identify if a noun is masculine or feminine, because then you'll need to decide what words you use with it. Now, a lot of times this is pretty straightforward because, as was said, a lot of them, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, like if it has an A, it's feminine, and if it has an O, it's masculine. So, for example, chica and hermana, girl and sister, would be feminine, but chico and hermano, boy and brother, would be masculine. Some other ones, for example, if the word ends in ion, tud, or dad, for example, lección, lesson, actitud, attitude, or igualdad, equality, then these words ending with those letters are feminine. Or to give you an example of some masculine ones, if it ends in or, so for example, amor, love, dolor, pain, or calor, heat, something I have a lot of in this moment. These are all masculine. So there are a lot of these. Don't worry about learning them all at the start. You'll just learn the nouns as you go. And of course, sometimes you will make mistakes, but that's not a problem. Okay, so you might think, right, well, that's all well and good, Matt. That's amazing. But why do I need to know if it's masculine or feminine? Like, what's the big deal? What is this concept? What's the effect of it? It's simply you need to know if a word is masculine and feminine because this alters the words that go with it. Okay, so I'll give you an example in English. So, for example, if you said, I spoke to John and he gave me the keys, or I spoke to Sarah and she gave me the cake, we can replace these with different words. For example, I could say, I spoke to him and he gave me them about the keys, or I spoke to her and she gave me it. So, these little words have to change because of the noun. Do you know whether it's masculine or feminine, like him or her, or whether singular, plural, like it or them? We'll think of it the same in Spanish, it's just they have a lot more variations. So we'll start off looking at articles. So what can you see in this photo? If you were describing it, the first thing you probably say is, well, there's a man. Yeah, and then if you wanted to go a bit deeper, you could probably say, well, the man is old or happy or sad or any of these things. Well, these things, the a and the, are called articles. We use a for a couple of things. One could be to introduce something new. For example, there is a man. It's the first time we've spoken about him. Or it could be something in general, like a cheetah is faster than a human. Whenever we use the, it's more specific because we said there's a man, and that could be any man. It's just introducing someone, and now we're going specific. The man is happy. The man is sad. So these are just known as articles, and in Spanish, depending on the gender, they change. So, for example, if the noun is masculine, the is el. For example, the boy, el chico, the brother, el hermano, or the man, el hombre. Okay, so that the is represented by el. However, if it's feminine, like the girl, it would be la. The girl is la chica. The sister, la hermana. Or the woman, la mujer. And as I said, not all things have a masculine and feminine form. Like, for example, the car is always el coche because it's masculine, or the house is always la casa because it's feminine. So, do you remember I said that the had many forms? So, we've already introduced that it has el if it's masculine, la if it's feminine, but it also has a singular and plural version. So, for example, if we're saying the car, we would say el coche. But if we want to say the cars in plural, we would have to say los coches. Los coches. So here the for plural nouns is los. The same way we have the house was la casa, but if it's the houses, then it would change to las casas. So it might seem like a lot to take in, but you've probably already seen these before because if we look at some famous examples, you have El Camino de Santiago. So it's like the way or the walk of St. James. So El Camino. That's a singular masculine noun, camino, so it has el. But if we look at Los Angeles, the angels, that's plural, so you have los. The same way you have La Paz in Bolivia, which would be the peace, because it's singular. But you have Las Vegas in Nevada, because that's a feminine plural, and that would mean the meadows. Another thing is that a or an, and remember there's no direct translation for an in Spanish because we just add that before a vowel sound in English to keep the pronunciation. So we have 4 versions for that. If it's a singular noun and it's masculine, for example, a car, it would be un coche. If it's feminine, for example, a house, it would be una casa. So un for masculine and una for feminine. And at the same time, if you want to say more than one, this would really just be like some or a few. It would be unos coches, like some cars, or unas casas, some houses. So that's one thing that it changes these articles, but the other thing is that the noun kind of has a ripple effect and affects other words in the sentence. So let's have a look at this. It is in Spanish is es, and expensive is caro, caro. So we could say, for example, the car is expensive. El coche es caro. El coche es caro. However, if we were to say the house is expensive, not only do we change the article, which would be la, we also have to say la casa es cara. La casa es cara. So you can see here the describing word, expensive or caro, because it goes with the feminine noun, it needs to convert itself or transform into a feminine adjective. Another example, we could have cheap, which is barato. So the car is cheap would be el coche es barato. So what do you think the house is cheap would be? Well, again, house is feminine, so we need to change barato to barata. So it would be la casa es barata. Now, it's important to note that an adjective doesn't actually have a gender per se. The nouns have the gender, and the adjective does follow suit. An adjective in Spanish is like those magic gloves you had when you were a child, you know, like they kind of adapt to any hand size. Well, it's the same. If you put an adjective with a masculine noun, you use the masculine form of the adjective, and if you put the adjective with a feminine noun, you use the feminine form of the adjective. The same way, adjectives have plurals in Spanish, so we could have el coche es caro or los coches son caros with an S. But we'll look at that in a different video. So you might think, well, what happens if I get it wrong? Do you know? Well, look, sometimes it's a problem and sometimes it's not. So we'll have a look in English at an example and see what you think. In this example, yesterday I was talking to her and he told me that she was sick of being the man that everyone depended on. Right? If you said this, you might think you're talking to multiple people, or it's a bit confusing. Like, who said what, or was he talking about somebody else, or was she telling you about somebody? You would have to specify. You would say, yesterday I was talking to her, and she told me that she was sick of being the woman that everyone depended on. So as you can imagine, with the context, most of the time people understand you, but if it's a long-winded sentence or it gets quite complex, it might get very confusing. So we'll look at some general points. So firstly, if it's a masculine noun, it's el. For example, el chico. And if it's a feminine noun, it's la. So for example, la chica. So el and la both represent the. At the same time, if it's a masculine plural, then we would use los for the. So for example, los chicos. Or if it was a feminine plural, we would use las for the, las chicas. A is simply un chico for the masculine, or una chica for the feminine. And the plural of this would be like a few or some. Then it would be unos chicos, the masculine plural, and unas chicas, the feminine plural. Some other things to note down is when we pluralize the noun, if it ends in a vowel, so a, e, I, o, u, we just add s. If it ends in any other letters, like a consonant, we add es. So for example, casa goes to casas, or computer, ordenador, goes to ordenadores. And just a couple of points to finish up. Generally, not all the time, the changes from masculine to feminine is a simple O to A. So here we can see el chico goes to la chica, or the waiter, el camarero, goes to la camarera, which would be the waitress. But of course, it's not always that simple. So for example, if it ends in a consonant, so for example, español, so el español, the Spanish man, would change to la española, which would be the Spanish woman. With a speaker, el orador for a male speaker, and la oradora for the female speaker. Some other ones don't change, we just change the article. So for example, for student, you could say el estudiante, which would be the male student, and la estudiante, the female student. Other examples like things like end in ista. So for example, futbolista, footballer, or aquí, here, dentista doesn't change. So the male dentist is el dentista, the female dentist is la dentista. And other times there's a dramatic change. So for example, the man would be el hombre and the woman la mujer. The bull would be el toro and the cow would be la vaca. So understand these are dramatic changes, just like you would have in English, like we have man going to woman or stallion going to mare. And they're just things that you need to pick up over time. So this is the end of this. It was just a preview into the course to sort of see what you thought about it. If you click below, I'm going to put some exercises on to give you an idea of what will be in the course. And I'd love your comments if it was useful, if it wasn't useful. If there's anything else you would like to see in the course or things you would like me to stop doing, then please let me know. Venga, muchas gracias. Right, well, thanks very much. And also, you can find out more in the links below, like for my Instagram, or if you want private classes, send me an email, anything like that. Okay? Venga, hasta luego. Cheerio.